It's time for Lefties Losing It, and let's start with a fine example of the modern left. They're privileged, out of touch, hateful, angry lefties. Let's hear from Jimmy Kimmel's wife and show producer, Molly McInerney, whose moral compass is so warped that she needs deprogramming. That's her word, not mine. First, listen to this bit of chutzpah. She seems to think that anyone who votes for Donald Trump is a victim of misinformation.
So there's like a little bit of sympathy I have for people in my family that I feel are kind of being deliberately misinformed every day.
Mm-hmm.
And they're deliberately being misinformed every day.
Are they watching your husband's awful program? Because that's where the hysteria, hate and misinformation is happening. You think we forgot about him lying, straight out lying about Charlie Kirk's murder? Let's hear more from Molly and her delusions of grandeur.
My husband is out there fighting this man. And to me, them voting for Trump is them not voting for my husband and me and our family. And I unfortunately have kind of lost relationships with people in my family because of it. Mm-hmm. This is not just Republican versus Democrat for me anymore. Mm-hmm. It is, to me, it's family values. I feel like I'm kind of in constant conflict and I'm angry all the time, which isn't healthy at all. But I personalize everything now. When I see these terrible stories every day, I'm immediately mad at certain aunts, uncles, cousins who put him in power. And it's really hard. And I wish I could deprogram myself in some way, but I get really angry.
Yeah, I think a deprogramming is a fine idea. Imagine being that lucky and privileged and choosing to be miserable and bitter every day, and nasty too, to your own flesh and blood. Now, here is another foul leftie with pronouns in her bio, naturally, who thinks it's fun to mock Erica Kirk, a grieving widow who lost the love of her life, the father of her 2 young children, in the most tragic circumstances. But for the left, well, it's just a reason to mock her.
All right, Erica, this is your moment. This is your moment to shine. This is your moment to show America how amazing you are. Be the sad, grieving widow that you have always dreamed of. This is my moment. Fox News. My husband. Yes, we should have cameras in the courtroom. My husband was murdered.
These people really are soulless. Now, let's go to another celebrity who really should not speak about politics. Russell Crowe was on Joe Rogan's podcast and was asked about what's happening in Australia. This was his asinine answer, and a warning here: you may lapse into a coma in the next 36 seconds as you listen to this, as Crowe struggles to articulate his love for Australia's radical left Prime Minister.
What is wrong with the way Australia's run?
Well, we're a little bit lucky at the moment. We have a Prime Minister who's very much motivated by trying to help everybody, which should be the job of a politician, right?
Sure.
To improve the lives of the people that they represent. And he's kind of inherited, a conga line of stupidity that was going on, and he's trying to fix things.
Now, the lockdown continues with the media, including ABC's George Stephanopoulos, continuing to blame the Republicans for Schumer's shutdown. Here, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent takes the Democrat operative to task, and listen to how this interview descends into farce before Scott gets a delicious dig in. Well played, sir.
You were involved in a lot of these in the 90s, and you basically called the Republicans terrorists, and you said that it is not the responsible party that keeps the government closed. And so what we need is 5 brave, moderate Democratic senators to cross the aisle, because right now it is 52 to 3. 5 Democrats can cross the aisle and reopen the government. That's the best way to do it, George.
I can disagree with you about the history there, but we don't need a history lesson right now.
George,
Let's talk about what's happening right now.
If you want, I've got all your quotes here. I've got all your quotes here, George.
I'm sure you do.
But
let's talk about the situation right now.
Read your book. So you got one purchase on Amazon this week, and that's very much what you said.
You know, the bulk of the media has worked tirelessly to live up to the fake news tag, to live up to the public's worst fears about their lack of accuracy and impartiality, and it's often the ones who bleat loudest about misinformation and disinformation who are most guilty. The leftist activists masquerading as neutral journalists, like the ones working at taxpayer-funded BBC, who have been caught out heavily doctoring a speech by President Trump on January 6, 2020, to make it look like he incited a riot. Let's look at what the BBC played, followed by what he actually said.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell. We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
Ooh, I like the sinister music they played in that doctored version, just to drive the point home, obviously. So how did that happen? Let's hear from the Telegraph's Gordon Rayner, who explains just how deliberate and dishonest the BBC were in manufacturing this bit of fake news, this rewriting of history.
The BBC spliced together two clips that took place 54 minutes apart.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we fight. We fight like hell.
They played that episode a week before the US election, obviously hoping for maximum impact, but they were caught, and for once there were consequences. The BBC's Director General Tim Davie and Head of News Deborah Turness have now been forced to step down. Joining me is Newsweek Senior Editor-at-Large and Article 3 Project Senior Counsel Josh Hammer. Josh, it is often the ones who scream loudest about misinformation who are guilty of what we just saw.
Well, that's quite possibly, Rita, the single most brazenly dishonest thing that I've ever seen the media do. And I want to just pause and kind of mull it over a second, because that's a very big statement that I just made. But that is outrageous. I mean, the Kamala Harris 60 Minutes CBS News interview definitely comes to mind. I mean, let's not forget just how badly CBS News tried to make the Kamala word salad come across as something remotely palatable in the final months of the 2024 election. That was absolutely horrific in its own rights. But this is astonishing. I mean, thank goodness there's been some accountability. I mean, someone has resigned there. But why are the British people paying for this? Why are the British people subjected out of their hard-earned taxpayer money? And, you know, the economy in the UK has not exactly been rocking and roaring for a number of decades now. So it's not exactly like people have money to splurge around, but they're subsidizing this crap. They're subsidizing this. I mean, here in the United States, we're subsidizing PBS and NPR. Well, I mean, Trump's taken some steps actually to finally extricate ourselves from that toxic bear hug of relationship with our taxpayer-funded media overlords. But at the barest to bare minimums, it's just one of many reasons why the public should not be engaged in the direct subsidization of media. This is utterly egregious stuff. I would like to see someone no less than Keir Starmer himself just condemn this and say this is not helpful. After all, last I checked, the US and the UK still had something going back to the Reagan-Thatcher days, probably even longer than that, to Churchill FDR, called the special relationship. If you guys actually care about the special relationship, you probably should stop doing things like this. That's just some helpful advice, shall we say.
And our taxpayer-funded ABC, I would say, are not much better. They've still got on their website, I think, a 3-part series they did on Russian collusion. Pretty much, I think they did that after it was debunked, and we've seen no corrections there either. Now, there were some disgraceful scenes earlier today as Washington Commander fans drowned out the reading of the oath of enlistment for on-field service members. President Donald Trump was trying to read this, trying to honour these members, but all you could hear were boos.
You solemnly swear that I will support
Now, boo the president as much as you like. It's a free country, and we are talking about DC here, where around 95% vote Democrat. So it's not a huge surprise. But Josh, to boo during an oath for members of the military is pretty pathetic in my book.
You know, Rita, as someone who grew up a New York Giants fan, I take at least some schadenfreude, at least some kind of perverse pleasure in seeing the Washington Commanders. I still call them the Redskins, but I take no modicum of pleasure in seeing the Redskins Commanders fans just utterly beclown themselves. But if I'm being less facetious, more serious, just for a second here, I mean, this is disgusting. I mean, once upon a time in America, there were certain things that did not become political. There were certain things that we could all rally around, that we all shared in common: the flag, the military, law enforcement. I mean, these are some of the examples there. In recent years, perhaps in recent decades, literally all of those things have actually become politicized. Law enforcement, need I even exaggerate? That's the entire Black Lives Matter, radical, defund the police, Zohran Mamdani, AOC, leftist, anti-cop agenda. The flag itself, the flag has become politicized as well. Here in the United States these days, if you see someone flying Old Glory, the red, white, and blue, out on the front porch, you probably know that that's a Trump supporter, because these days, no Biden, Kamala Harris, Gavin Newsom will be shot dead flying the American flag. Ditto support for the U.S. Armed Forces. But this is, I hate to kind of go so black-pilled, so bleak for a second here, but I mean, this is just one of those moments where you kind of just think to yourself, man, I mean, is this country really going to make it for another 100, 200 years, whatever? I mean, when you have people booing active duty service members in our volunteer military, there's no conscription here in the United States. This is a volunteer military, people that are volunteering to die, to defend your way of life, and you have the chutzpah to boo them because you don't like Donald J. Trump. Get out of here. If you hate this country this much, just leave. Literally, be gone. Good riddance. I don't want to use my countrymen. Honestly, that would solve, frankly, a lot of our problems, to be honest.
Yeah, it was absolutely disgraceful. And you're right about the American flag. Even when Biden was in office, it really didn't change, did it? If you saw an American flag outside someone's home, you presume they're a Republican, you presume they're conservative, because they will fly every other flag. They'll have the rainbow flag, the trans flag, the Black Lives Matter flag, but not the American flag. Now, Fox News is reporting that a federal grand jury has subpoenaed former CIA Director John Brennan, former FBI officials, among others, as a part of the Justice Department's investigation into the origins of the Trump-Russia probe. Let's hear now from Stephen Miller, White House Deputy Chief of Staff.
Comey, Clapper, Brennan, Obama, Monaco, all conspired together, all worked together to try to sabotage, undermine, unravel the democratic institutions and structures of this country. The Russiagate hoax, the Russiagate conspiracy, and all of the assaults against our liberties that went with it, the pre-dawn raids, the handcuffing of innocent Americans, the espionage against President Trump's campaign and staff.
Josh, could you see this investigation extending further to perhaps even include Barack Obama? Stephen Miller calls the Russian collusion conspiracy an insurrection.
Well, first of all, I love Stephen Miller. I've known Stephen for years. I am an unabashed fan. He's one of the more polarizing figures here in America, even within the broader right. I happen to be a longtime huge fan of Stephen's. I hope that Stephen actually has even higher ambitions, frankly, than White House Deputy Chief of Staff, which is what he currently has now. I think that guy is just an absolute rock star. Look, Barack Obama, Rita, if I'm being very candid with you, is probably not going to be prosecutable under the Trump versus United States Supreme Court precedent. That was the immunity case that came out of the court just last year, where they basically said that if there is a core Article 2 presidential power, then it is very difficult to prosecute. That's one of the whole things of the case. Now, having said that, if Barack Obama engaged in anti-constitutional subterfuge after the transition of power, so after January 20th, 2017, back during Trump's first term, if prosecutors and Harmeet Dillon and Pam Bondi, if all the folks in the DOJ can actually get evidence of that totally changes the calculation, to be honest with you. But right now, I don't see them getting Obama. I do think John Brennan has a real shot to get him on a perjury charge, if nothing else, because the perjury statute of limitations here in the United States, when you're talking about the federal crime, perjuring himself before Congress, is 5-year statute of limitations. And he had congressional testimony 4 years ago in 2021 That's just a lie. It's literally just a lie about the origins of the Russiagate collusion going back to the transition period in December 2016 to January 2017 and the infamous ICA intelligence community assessment that basically was the origin of the weaponization of leading to the Mueller probe. He lied. He lied to comment about that there. I genuinely hope that they prosecute John Brennan. Let's not forget that Jim Comey's actually already been indicted there. So John Brennan would kind of just be some additional icing on the cake. But, you know, I hate to be the bearer of bad news. I don't see them getting Barack Obama. Again, unless there's something that I'm missing, which is always possible. But frankly, I think John Brennan would actually be quite surprised if they can actually get him on perjury.
Oh, absolutely. And of course, these characters continued their election interference because they told us that the contents of Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation. It was some sort of, again, Russian campaign. Now, let's hear from veteran Democrat operative James Carville. He's got his crystal ball out and he's making some bold predictions.
A Democrat is going to be elected in 2028. You know that. I know that. He's going to be a Democratic House, going to be a Democratic Senator. The Democratic president is going to announce a special transition advisory committee on the reform of the Supreme Court, that we could have our third branch of government has lost the faith and trust of the American people, that the number of Supreme Court justices go from 9 to 13. That's going to happen, people. That's going to happen to you. They're going to win. They're going to do some blue ribbon panel of distinguished jurists, and they are going to recommend 13 and a Democratic Senate and House. They're going to pass it, and the Democratic president is going to sign it because they have to do an intervention so we can have a Supreme Court that the American people trust again.
And by American people, he, of course, means those who vote Democrat only, Josh. How seriously do you take those predictions? I know he still has the respect of a lot of people. A lot of people see him as actually a sensible, old-school Democrat compared to the radical new ones. But are they serious about these so-called reforms to the Supreme Court?
Rita, my first question is, what is the Raging Cajun smoking? I mean, what kind of goods does he have there stashed in his house down in Louisiana that would lead him to confidently make this pronunciation? I mean, frankly, you know, if I were an ambitious local prosecutor, I would consider that video probable cause to launch a drug raid. I mean, I'm very curious what kind of goods he has stashed in the house that would lead him to say these crazy things there. But you know, Jimmy Carville is basically the left-wing equivalent of Bill Kristol here in the U.S. I mean, Bill Kristol, to be clear, is now left-wing. He said he voted for Mamdani in New York City. Guy is totally out to lunch. But Carville, my point, Reed, is that this guy was actually sensible once upon a time. I mean, he was the brains of the 1992 winning Bill Clinton presidential campaign. He was the whole it's the economy stupid guy there. He was the whole guy that devised the entire brilliant strategy. Not one that I would support if I were old enough to have opinions, but the strategy to essentially defeat George H.W. Bush on the whole read my lips, no new taxes thing. So he was actually a very clever political strategist, focused once upon a time on bread and butter issues like crime and the economy. And now he's just saying just utterly far left garbage like this. He has no idea what he's talking about. No Democrats are not going to pack the Supreme Court. It's not going to happen. It's literally it's not going to happen. But having said that, the fact that someone who once upon a time was viewed as a centrist, reasonable, moderate figure is looking in the camera and is saying this confidently because of whatever he's currently on. He is making these pronunciations confidently. That should nonetheless, I think, be a clear message, not just to conservatives, but to swing voters in the middle as to what the Democratic Party has become today, because they are making threats, whether they are real or whether they're empty. And I do think that they are largely empty threats here, but they are playing with fire. Because they're talking here about the very nature of the American constitutional order. They want to add Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico as states. Frankly, they want to abolish the U.S. Senate, Rita. They think the U.S. Senate itself, the senior legislative chamber, they view it as a vestige of a white patriarchal colonial society because Wyoming has the same number of votes in the Senate as California, New York. Garbage. I mean, there are very good reasons why we have this current setup here. They want to pat the court, though. They're playing with fire, and I think the American people are frankly going to look at videos like that, and they're going to say, I don't know what the heck this guy's talking about, but I know I don't like it. Therefore, I'm voting for the other guy.
Let's hope so. Now, we've spoken about the exodus from New York by those alarmed by Zoran Mamdani's triumph there. The Mamdani refugees will be fleeing New York City, and among them will be, sadly, many Jews, Josh. But despite Mamdani's radical rhetoric and anti-Israel views, the exit polls, the CNN exit polls, showed that 1 in 3 Jews in New York City voted for him. Does that surprise you?
Well, two things to note here, Rita. One is that if you look at the exit poll that I saw, to be clear, that number is galling. But on the other hand, it actually was a slightly lower percentage of Jews for Mamdani than Protestants and Catholics in New York for Mamdani. So Cuomo actually beat Mamdani in New York City among Jews, Catholics, and Protestants. Mamdani just won people who have no religious affiliation, and he won that by like a shockingly high margin. He got like 70% of the religiously unaffiliated votes. Having said that, 1/3 of Jews voting for Mamdani is obviously 1/3 too many. And you look at some heavily Jewish precincts, such as the Upper West Side, and the Upper West Side went for Mamdani. Now, a lot of the more religious communities in Brooklyn and so forth went very heavily for Cuomo against Mamdani. Rita, the reality here is that the Jewish community in the United States is extremely politically divided between religiously observant and just culturally traditional Jews and deeply assimilated, progressive, left-wing, reform Jews, et cetera there. You know, my old friend Ben Shapiro likes to refer to these Jews as ginos, as Jews in name only, and in comparison to rhinos, Republicans name only there. They might be halakhically Jewish under Jewish law, that is to say. They might think that they enjoy a bagel and lox or watching Seinfeld or Curb Your Enthusiasm reruns, but there's nothing particularly Jewish about them there. And unfortunately, Rita, this is the story of the Jewish people going back thousands and thousands of years. The good news from a sheer demographic and political voting pattern perspective is that it is the more traditional and religious Jews that are actually marrying other Jews, unlike the left-wing Jews, who are having lots of Jewish children. So I think that the Jewish voting demographic in America, call it 10, 15, 20 years from now, is going to be considerably different looking than it is now. And I would argue considerably more right wing, which is a very good thing.
Josh Hammer, thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you, Rita.